Hi, my name's David Martin and I'm joined by my co-host Craig Patterson. This is the Heads and Horizons podcast where we and our guests discuss the challenges of leadership and how with a little professional help and support, leaders can better navigate change, deal with organisational complexity and create a more productive and engaging work environment leading to higher team performance.
So, welcome to this final episode of the first series of Heads and Horizons. Over the last few weeks, we've talked about leading when things are uncertain, how to bring people with you through change, how to deal with self-doubt, and last time having those conversations that you'd actually rather avoid. Today, we're looking at what happens next, the moments when leaders are rethinking their future. That might mean reinventing yourself, scaling things up, scaling things down, or taking a completely different path. It's about renewal, transition, and finding clarity, whether you're ready for it or it's maybe come sooner than expected. So Dave, first question to you, how do you know if it's time to make a big change or to just adjust what you're already doing?
So that's actually quite a big question, Craig, and I don't mean that necessarily in a philosophical sense. But as in, there are lots of ways that I can potentially answer it. But let me share just a couple of thoughts in the interest of brevity. I mean, sometimes, as you sort of alluded to, we don't get to take that decision right. Change is just foisted upon us. But when we do consider a big change, or when I do or did to be more specific, it's often been because the role I was in had evolved so much from the one I took on that I probably wouldn't have actually applied for it today. I think if you stay in a role, or a company for that matter, for a reasonable amount of time, it's natural, impossible not to, in fact, adjust and evolve in that role. That's often simply a natural reaction to the organisation evolving around you, but can also be as a result of your own competence in that role developing, even the level of comfort that you feel in your surroundings changing, be that the company culture, the people, the structures, the hierarchy and so on. So I think adjustments happen naturally or automatically when someone's tenure at an organisation has some level of longevity. But for me, those bigger moves came when I found myself in roles that evolved so much that I no longer felt that the role was a good fit for me, or vice versa, or both perhaps. And just quickly to conclude, because I think most people find themselves in stopgap roles at some point too. Those filler positions that simply retain the continuity, keep the lights on and the bills paid. And that's okay. But in those situations, there's no deep consideration as to whether it's time to make a change. Because in those roles, I think you just accept that the short-term nature of them and move on as soon as you feel right to do so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure many people listening will have experienced that.
Good. So look, my turn then, Craig. Question for you. What do you see as the first things to get clear on when you're moving into a new phase, whether that's a new role, a scaled-down pace, or even a complete pivot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that you need to have some form of a plan. I'd encourage everybody that's in this position to set aside some time just to sit and think about, what this new phase or new chapter, be that a new job, be it about taking a smaller job, be it about retiring, taking up a new hobby, whatever it is, I think it's important to have a plan. I think about what do you want to get from this next phase? Is it about, if it's about a promotion, if it's about a bigger organisation, is it about more income, more balance, more work-life balance, more purpose, more space? I mean, it could be any one of those things. But I think being clear on the plan and then thinking about what are the priorities that you have within that plan. So what are the non-negotiables that you want to protect? So, for example, if it's a new role that involves lots of travelling, that might be an inevitability that's maybe not something you really want to do, but what are the non-negotiables? So is it one weekend a month or every other weekend that are totally undisturbed? So I think just having some boundaries. Yeah, of course we have to operate with flexibility, but I think setting out with these are really what my red lines are. Or indeed, if it's something, if it's not a new job or something like that, it could be around protecting your personal time, your health. It could be about financial security or personal impacts. There's lots of different things to think about. Have a think also about the resources you need. So do you need certain skills? So if you want to take up a new hobby, are there things that you need to learn? Do you need money to take that hobby up? I know a lot of people go and do golf, not a cheap hobby. So think about that. And the energy that you might need as well. And that's as I say, it can be for new jobs, or it can be for downscaling, downsizing, or slowing your pace. What about the other thing for me would be support. What support do you need around you? It might be that it's something that's only done with you, and therefore it's just you that needs to have the self motivation. But with something else, it might be that you need a mentor. You might need family, friends, a support network of some kind. So I think the plan is the important thing. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be on a big spreadsheet or very glamorous, but just having a starting point really would be my suggestion.
And I think that's the point that I would take, Craig. Have a plan. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be war and peace, but it's important to have some understanding of what comes next, what's important to you, what's not. And have that up your sleeve or in your back pocket or whatever the right metaphor is for whenever change comes. Because change, as I mentioned, sometimes comes at the most unexpected times and not necessarily always on our terms. So
absolutely. And would you agree, Dave, that even if that does happen, then would you advise people to take that step back, an opportunity, even if it's unexpected, just to think about what it means and just plan that a little bit?
Absolutely, Craig. And I think I'd almost take that a stage further and try and foresee those changes a little bit if possible. That's obviously not always possible, but
Yeah.
be prepared. Be prepared for the unexpected. So when change does come along, either on your terms or maybe somebody else's terms, you're ready for it. You're not caught on the back foot. You have some sense of, okay, this is happening to me now, and I've thought about it. And whilst the timing may not be perfect for me, but I'm still ready for it.
Thanks, Dave. So look, the next question over to you. So how do you hold confidence steady when you're in that middle transition between the old and the new, and that new hasn't started yet?
I guess that sort of depends on why the change is taking place to a certain extent, Craig, as we were saying. In that transitional phase or state, is it actually confidence that you're trying to retain, or is it commitment? Sure, if it's become apparent to you and probably the folks around you that you're no longer the best or the right fit for the role as it stands, you might question your own competence, and that can naturally impact confidence. I mean, that's actually a great coaching scenario, isn't it? It's in these situations that you need to reframe how you look at your current position and tell yourself even, that the fact that the role has changed hasn't altered who you are and your level of competence. You were the right fit for the role when you started, just as you are for what comes next. And the fact that the role has shifted under your feet has nothing to do with your capability, but more the changing needs of the business. But if you do find yourself in this no man's land because you've perhaps outgrown the role and need to move on for your own reasons, the question becomes, for me anyway, how do you stay committed during that transition? I guess if you're an individual contributor, it perhaps matters a little bit less. But when people are looking to you for leadership, that's a test of commitment to those people. And when I was in situations like that later in my career, I always felt a strong sense of obligation to maintain a sense of business as usual for the sake of those people, even if mentally and emotionally I'd already checked out. That seemed logical, Craig?
Absolutely. These are the times that I think most people will go through at some stage. So I think you have to just remain, as you say, remember that it's not necessarily defining of who you are or who you've been, and try and hang on to those things because, as you said, some of the sands underneath you may have moved. But of course, it's also an opportunity to reflect on what you could do differently if you feel you could.
That's very true. That reflective point is very true as well, Craig. So, look, final question for Series 1 for you then, Craig. How do you plan for what's next without losing focus on where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that there's a lot of similarity with what we said in the previous question about when you're moving to a new phase. But I think what we're focusing on here is not losing focus on where you are now. So if you're moving out of a role, I suppose it's thinking about what do you want your legacy to be? Of course, you don't always get the opportunity. It could be that you're there today, gone tomorrow. So that's unfortunate. But in situations where you do want to move on and it's planned by you, then I think having that view of legacy, of what you want to be known for, what you want to be remembered for having achieved, even though, as we all know, in organisations that can feel quite difficult. But I think it's for you as an individual. I'm not saying it with a view of you getting some accolade or somebody looking back and saying, look at the amazing thing that so-and-so did for this company. But it's more about can you leave with your head held high, having delivered what you feel you wanted to deliver, and leave things in a way that's set up for the next person as possible and for your team if you've got one. I think it's important to think about this, though, that when you've made a decision or when you're thinking about moving on, that there are various emotions that go on. It can be mentally, emotions. It can be physical. It can manifest itself physically. So I think that the important thing is to do a bit of a self-assessment, a bit of an MOT, I suppose, in terms of where am I, in terms of mentally, physically, emotionally over the next however long this transition is. And then I think, again, going back to what we said before about having some sort of an idea, a plan. So I'm thinking here is just maybe a sketch of in your mind about where do you want to go? What is the direction that you're heading in? And that will hopefully ensure that you maintain your focus, but still gives you that pull towards the future. I think running those two things in parallel is a good idea. But the other thing, and I think we said this before in previous podcasts, is that it doesn't always have to be massive leaps. It can be small steps that you can take to make sure you're not losing focus. And recognise also that we're all human. It's really, really important to recognise that when you decided to transition or do something different, that motivation is going to wane, it's going to reduce, and that's actually perfectly normal. And we shouldn't beat ourselves up for that. But it's about how do I want to finish the race? That's the how do I finish this phase? How do I want to finish this phase? And finally, check in with yourself regularly. Are you drifting one way too much or the other way too much? Are you stuck? Do you need a bit of impetus to move yourself forward to tomorrow? So I think it's, it's, as I say, it's situation dependent because sometimes you don't get the luxury of this. But for me, it's about thinking through, about having a blueprint, a sketch, as I said, about how you're going to aim to get there. And that legacy thing, I think, is always an important consideration.
Yeah, legacy is it's an interesting thought in this context. But the other thing you mentioned there, Craig, is about small steps and small moves. There was an interesting piece of research by some I think it was Harvard actually, which was I think termed the Dark Horse Project. And what the research found was that the most successful people don't actually make big changes, big leaps. They make small, meaningful changes. Things that feel right for them at the time, that feel fulfilling. So rather than having this big grand career plan with lots of big moves, the most successful people actually take a multiple of smaller steps to actually make greater progress.
Yeah.
Maybe more for another day. So that's it for this episode and for the first series of Heads and Horizons. We've covered a lot of ground over these 5 conversations, and we hope that you, the listeners, have found something in each that you can take away and use in your own leadership. So thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.
Dave, just one thing before you go, really important, I know listeners will want to know, is that we do have a success story of sorts. So just the tomato delivered, just so people know.
I am delighted that leaves me fulfilled, Craig, knowing that. So we can maybe look forward to future updates in the next season.